All right, so we're gonna talk about permits. When you need them, when you don't need them. You know, when you're looking for them, who has them, who's gonna have the record of them.
Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. What's that? So we're gonna find out like who is gonna have the record of the permit.
I actually use the trackpad.
I hate it.
He's got big hands. Big hands. So, all right, so City of Norfolk, I know for a fact, only keeps permits on record for 3 years. Unless it is an occupancy permit. At this, which point it will move to land records, which is also considered deeds in the City of Norfolk. So what happens is after 3 years, unless the occupancy of the building has been changed, there is no more record of it. You will not find that. If somebody did a flip on a house 3 years ago, you will not be able to find those permits. They don't exist anymore. They purge their records.
And that's just in Norfolk.
That's in most of the
That's in
cities.
most of
They,
them.
everybody's got a little bit of a different one. Virginia Beach is 3 years as well. They keep theirs on record for 3 years. I'm not sure what Chesapeake's is.
But
So, go ahead.
for
Peninsula, it's
example,
the
if I
same.
have a permit for a new bathroom,
Yeah.
and you know, it's not more record, the record is not there anymore, but you know, in the how do you say, in the building itself, you know, is going to have an extra bathroom.
Right, so
Or
the,
what you don't find is the
no,
permit.
so that will go to land records. So land records will now have an update where that became on the tax record from a, you know, 4-bedroom, 1 bath to a 4-bedroom, 2 bath. And they will be able to see if the tax record was changed and when the tax record was changed. And if the tax record was changed, they'll know that it was a permitted and approved.
Okay.
So can you talk through, like, for the example of like a bathroom, like what would actually be the process for someone who hasn't ever gone through that? What would be the process of getting and putting in a new bathroom and then having it recorded?
Okay, so to add a new bathroom, you are going to need, and each city is a little bit different, but you're gonna need a framing permit, which includes a building permit. You're gonna need a plumbing permit. If you are venting, you are going, you know, like, you have to bring the air in there. You're gonna need an HVAC permit. Only an HVAC contractor can pull that permit. An owner can pull the rest of the permits under an owner's permit. You're gonna need an electrical permit, and each stage of it has to be approved. So you have framing and rough-in, which is like the electricity's in the wall, the wires are there, the plumbing is there, but nothing is hooked up. All of those have to be signed off on before they can be covered. You cannot cover. And then you get approval to cover. And then once you get
And cover meaning,
drywall up. So, and then if it's an exterior wall, it has to be insulated. Interior walls do not have to be insulated. Like, if the insulation is old, it has to be brought to code. So if you have an older house built in the 50s that doesn't have insulation that is up to par now, and you are now changing this, when you open that wall, you are now going to have to upgrade that insulation.
Just where you're opening it or? the
Just
whole-
where you're opening it.
What's that
No, not the whole thing.
say?
What happened if the permit is never closed? I have a permit,
It goes away after a while.
okay.
I mean, they don't keep a record of it. You know what I mean? What do you have a permit for?
I don't know, just asking.
I'm just curious. I mean, depends on what the permit was for. It could come back to bite some buyer in the butt later on.
so in her scenario, she put in a bathroom but for whatever reason, it didn't make it to land record, or it didn't make it to the land record. So now
Right.
there's a discrepancy between how many bathrooms the house actually has and how many they have
Right.
on record.
So now let's say that tax record needs to be updated and somebody did unpermitted work. Okay, let's say it's unpermitted work.
Mhm.
Like, your worst case scenario is the city comes up there and is like, because they have to inspect everything. The city comes there, and if somebody covered before those rough-in finals were done, you're gonna have to open those walls and let them see everything.
So if they got rid of the permit, or they.
So
go after
it
3
depends on
years,
what stage they're in the permit. Did they get the rough-in approved and finalized? Because there's multiple processes to each permit. So let's say they did the rough-in portion of the permit and that was finalized and signed off on. but the permit was never closed. They will be able to dig through the records. They're no longer in office, but they will have it somewhere where they'll be like, it was signed off on here, but the final was never done. You can have them out outside of you can have them out to issue the final.
So they're being held in a cloud somewhere, is basically what you're saying.
Somewhere, they're
They're just
somewhere,
not
but
as easy as that accessible.
no,
as
most
there
of
was
them
that.
will go to
Okay.
land records. So like, I know for in particular, Virginia Beach, the permit office is no longer gonna have them. They're going to be with land records somewhere. Cause it does stay attached to the property. It's just a matter of who can you get to give you the thing you want?
Yeah.
Cause it's a lot of research.
Well, I mean, it brings up a good point because there's builders in Ocean View that
Mhm.
built houses, like a whole big old house without pulling a permit, not one permit.
Yep.
It's like, how did they get that far in the game without the city? We all know, I mean, people that live in Norfolk, especially in Ocean View, you see the city people on their
Yep.
little pickup trucks and cars driving around all the time.
Mhm.
So it's like, how do they not notice this big ass 3,000 square foot house being built on Fourth Day
Right?
without it being, okay, cool, it got built. And then somehow came out that the builder never pulled one permit for it. So I don't know if they had to re-inspect everything, like you said, open up walls or
They're
whatever.
most
probably,
likely
right?
did.
More than likely.
Well, so
So-
it's either that or tear it down.
Yeah, which is crazy, right?
Right.
But my question, I guess I'm trying to get at is what, if it's been greater than 3 years,
So if
do
it's
you
been,
have to go and get it from that archive?
yes, you'd have to ask them to retrieve it from the archive. And sometimes they can and sometimes they can't, because I've had it where land records is like, no, I remember when the land records, they, especially in Virginia Beach, there's this one lady that remembers everything. I don't know how she does it. So there was a house over off of Salina in Virginia Beach, and they had filled in the garage. They had made that a usable space. Well, they never got it permitted, but they were able to update it into the land records because I had called to ask about it because it looked a little interesting. I was like, that doesn't seem quite right. So the land records lady says, no, I remember this from 15 years prior. She was like, it was a big to-do because they had it there for 10 plus years and had transferred owners 3 different times. So at that point, the city gets to decide, okay, and they get to negotiate, because obviously 3 owners ago is not your fault, right? So you get to kind of negotiate with the city. They have to make it right, but how do they make it right? So now you're in negotiations. Like, what do they want? What do they want you to show them? So, and she remembers that one, and it ended up being the city was able to update their tax record, but the city did have to come out. They had to hire somebody to scope certain things with a camera instead of cutting open walls.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So what was the question you wanted me to ask?
I wanted to ask you, Craig, how do we get around the 90-day rule on a VA loan?
What is the 90-day rule?
So it's the same as it's the anti-flipping.
But for people who have not heard that before, what?
So- So VHGA, or not VHGA, I'm so sorry. FHA, if you are selling a house from purchase within 90 days to 6 months, I think FHA is a little bit longer. Don't quote me if I'm wrong. They'll require 2 appraisals for the new value if it's before that 6-month period. If it's before that 90-day period, a lot of times they don't want to lend on it because the difference in value and under that 90 days.
And that is for what types of?
That is for FHA. Now
In my
VA, I've been
experience
able
was
to go
180
around this because VA tends to follow the same rules as FHA. But I've been able
The
to,
appraisal usually sticks with if it was a VA buyer, I thought that the appraisal usually sticks with the VA buyer for 6 months.
it does.
In that property.
Right, so I'm not talking about somebody didn't purchase this on a VA, right?
Okay.
So let's say somebody bought this property at auction
Okay.
and they bought it for $80,000. I went through this exact scenario in September of last year.
Yeah.
So the property was bought. Yes, T?
I'm clearly in the struggle bus here. Oh, goodness. Okay, Zoom is kicking my butt. Can you guys hear me?
Now I can.
Okay. On the whole appraisal, the VA appraisal, I wanted to ask this because I had a case that we actually had 2 appraisals done back to back, and the lender was able to ask for a new appraisal, so it didn't stick with the house. And we were, because the first one was super low, and we changed lenders to get the deal done. The first one was like 30,000 below the sales price. So long story short, we had to change lenders, and we were able to get a new appraisal because we're
Right.
able to show significant
Right, so if your
I can-
buyer is
yeah.
willing to switch lenders, you can get a new appraisal. However, the original appraisal carries quite a bit of weight. And the new appraiser can see that appraisal.
Yeah, because it gives us a case number. to
Yeah.
answer your question. That's literally how they bring it up. That property with that veteran gets assigned a case number. And once that case number is assigned, if it comes up with that borrower again, I would assume that their
Flags.
name flags, hey, this so-and-so has a case number with so-and-so property.
Mhm.
So I'm not familiar with that. I'm not saying, obviously it happens, so that's great.
Oh, and it worked. So
Yeah, that's
that's
that's awesome.
don't give up. That's the only
No,
reason why I
absolutely.
said
We
something.
never give up. That's why honestly, a lot of lenders are afraid to, I think we're getting off on a tangent in my apologies.
That's okay, go ahead.
Um,
I'm plugging in my computer.
a lot of lenders are afraid to call the VA, but we are not. We will call the VA underwriter for clarification on things like the appraisals. Appraisals are obviously the big thorn in the side for buyers and sellers for VA loan especially. So if we can present a case, I've spoken on this before at team meetings, that if we can present a case that this so-and-so house should be, usually it's for like chipping or peeling paint, like dumb things that the appraiser should just let go because the windows are 90 years old and they're going to replace the windows anyway. As long as the buyer signs off on it and the seller signs off on it, the VA is like, okay, that's cool. But the appraiser sticks black and white. These windows are crappy. They need to be replaced. Boom, boom, boom. We can't do it. But the underwriter, appraiser, whoever you want to call them at the VA can actually override whatever that VA appraiser says. So when whoever said don't give up, they're very right in that. Do not give up, because if you contact the VA directly in any scenario, whether it be underwriting stuff or appraisal stuff, you can definitely if you have a good case to present, then you can definitely win. Because we do it all the time for appraisals and additional other underwriting items too, like income things or whatever BS that you can
And
think of
just
that our
remember,
underwriter might not be cool
On that note, the lender can only present the information that you give them.
with. Mhm.
So if you're not giving your lender enough information and enough to fight with, then you're not winning.
But yeah, that's great. Congratulations on getting that done.
Good job, T.
I don't really know the question that you're asking though. I hate
In
to say that.
September, yeah, what was the rest of your?
Okay, so in September,
I hate to sound.
no, that's okay. So the property was purchased at auction for like $80,000. They did about $30,000 worth of work. Okay, so now we're at what, 115,
Maybe.
something like that, all in. They now turned around and sold the house for 230,000, I believe it was under contract for. Yeah. And one of the things that we got asked by the lender and by underwriting is, first off, where are all the permits? Because it's obviously a flip. Where are all the lien releases? Because it's being sold in under 90 days, and you have 90 days to file a mechanics lien.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other thing that we were asked is, on the appraisal, they had to give us a really good case about the new value.
Yes.
They had to justify that new value.
So there are very strict anti-flipping laws. There are very, very strict, and we don't really see them often. Obviously you would experience probably more than anybody in this room, but we definitely get tested on it. I don't know if it's part of y'all's test that you take, but there's definitely anti-flipping laws that are, and it's to protect the buyer
Yes.
100% of the time. So just know if it gets red flagged, whether it be from a company like mine, or the agent your buyer agent is smart enough to know the anti-flipping laws, then yes, don't be upset, because these things are here to protect the buyer. And I'm sorry if you're on the seller side of that, they're there to protect the buyer. 9 times out of 10, every law that's out there is to protect the buyer.
So it's 90 days?
So what
Is it
happens with
because
the
of
90?
Mechanics lien?
It's
Like,
because
just
of the
to make sure
mechanics
they're
lien.
not
That's why we
getting
call it a
fined.
90-day rule. It's the
So they can't
mechanics
come, so
lien.
they can't come back and say, on the 88th day, hey, I did a at 586 West Ocean View. Guess what? I got a mechanics lien on there for 88, for $100,000 and it hasn't been 90 days yet. Now that new borrower is
Right.
kind of screwed.
Yeah,
If Thomasina
Makes
was in
sense.
here,
But-
she would have given you a bottle of wine for that.
but
dang.
sorry, I will bring bottles of wine next time, okay?
No,
No, it's all good. We can cheer for alcohol. But so the other, this is also why you have title insurance.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Without title insurance, that mechanics lien will stick.
Yep.
And that's one thing I'm not a pusher when it comes to a lot of things, when it comes to, hey, you should go with insurance, or you should do this, you should do that. Owner's title insurance is the one and only thing that I say, it's worth the $800 or the $1,200 or $1,500, whatever it is. It is so worth it because it protects you, not just for title things, but for what she's talking about. Obviously, that's
So
part of title, but
yeah,
it's
so if,
very important to get that. And people are like, oh, well, I want to be chintzy and not spend the extra $1,000 in closing costs.
well, it's not even that
It's
because
insurance,
here's
literally.
the thing is we've all done this, right? We've had picker items and those picker items need to be repaired and they could be HVAC picker items. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be a very expensive picker item. If that contractor does not get paid on closing, and we've seen it done where somebody paid the contractor out of pocket or whatever, we didn't collect a receipt, seller side didn't collect a receipt, that person can then go put a lien on that house.
The picker owner, the owner
Or
of the
did-
picker company,
No, yeah, well, the owner of the picker company, whoever they hired to do
the work.
the work. You go put a lien on that house, that's against your buyer.
Now, if a house has an extra bathroom.
Yeah.
That they never have a permit.
Mhm.
I have no problems to sell the house, right?
What?
If this property has an extra bathroom that they never got permits.
Right.
When I am going to sell this house, I know there is an extra house that it did not get permits. At the time when I am going to sell the house, do I have problems to sell it? Because it did not have permits and I know it has an extra.
It depends on, well, first off, it depends on how savvy of a buyer's agent you are. Are you gonna ask the right questions? Who's calling the city to find out? Do your people care that there's an extra bathroom? Is it gonna cause them issues later on when they sell it? If you can't get the value for that extra bathroom, Liz, you wanna weigh in here?
I mean, I think it just depends on how far down the food chain of putting it in,
Yeah,
because, I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, if the seller, if the current seller isn't the one that installed it, then everybody's kind of like held harmless.
exactly.
But, but if it's the current people, I mean, if they're smart enough, it's a don't ask, don't tell situation. I don't know, I bought it like this, it appeared, whatever.
Mhm.
I mean, it really is.
Kind of a gray area.
And bathrooms or kitchens are funny because they're gonna have plumbing and electrical.
Well, now, so there's a difference. So like, let's say you wanna upgrade your existing bathroom. Do you need a permit?
I mean, we tearing out walls.
I don't know.
I mean,
What
if you
we
ask,
doing?
if you ask a
I
city,
mean, we're changing how many water, we're changing like how many shower heads a shower's gonna have. I mean, and we're having multiple extra water inputs put in, then you would have to pull a permit, but if you're changing the toilet, you wouldn't.
Right.
if you ask any city inspector, they're gonna tell you, pull a permit for everything. I
They're
mean,
not.
that's just what they say. That's their overarching answer.
Right.
If you're replacing a toilet, you're replacing something that's existing.
That is-
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you are replacing what is existing, you do not need a permit.
I tell people all the time, I love a green toilet, because other people are fussing, and if they buy me a new toilet, I'll put it in after closing,
Right?
because it's 2 waxing and a little bit of swearing.
Right. And somebody laying flat on their floor going, you got it, you got it.
I'm like, oh, to do this.
I have a question.
Yes.
What if, you have, some buyers, they are, purchase a house. The listing says that the garage had been started being put into, it had started the process of turning it into another room, into livable space. So thus far, all that's been done is sealing the garage door and turning it into a exterior human door. And so that's the only change that's been made so far. your client, so it was being sold as a 3-bed. And the pricing was for a 3-bed, and your client, the buyer is knowing that they're going to want to live in this space, this house forever. This is their forever home. So if they ever finish that room, what do they need to do? One, in reality, and two, what's the actual, best outcome, and then what are the cons to it, or something like that.
Okay, so in order to change the exterior of a home, change the means of egress window. It includes windows, doors, anything that's going to the outside of the home, you need a building permit. In order to create an additional livable space, you need an occupancy permit. Which means that anything that was covered over, you're gonna have to open those walls because they're exterior walls, which means they have to verify the framing, they have to verify the insulation, and they have to verify that the electrical was upgraded properly, and is their HVAC hooked up to it? You need an HVAC permit for that.
So what if so this is their forever home, so they're like, well, we're just gonna, finish off this stuff, whatever, but it doesn't need to be updated in the tax records. I'm okay with it not ever being listed as like livable space. But then they decide, oh, actually, I am going to sell this. Now what?
You're in that gray area again where they bought it like this and nobody checked. Now, your worst case scenario is the city comes in and says, you can't do this, you need to turn it back into a garage. That's what's on the tax record as. Your best case scenario is you get to negotiate with the city to try to get the permits pulled for that and to prove to them that it was done properly. But you don't know who did that work. They don't know who did that work.
So you may not have to even pay taxes on that.
You wouldn't be paying taxes on it, right?
It's your listing,
Because
because it's a 3-bedroom.
Right, so it's not assessed, so, I mean, there's tax penalties there as well. I don't know what the consequences for that would be. Or if the consequences would even fall on your buyer.
I got a perfect example.
Yes,
My house, I have a really long garage. So I put up a non-load bearing wall in the middle of it, and I put my motorcycle and a few other things in the front, and it has its own space. But in the back half, I needed not living space, I needed places to put refrigerators and for people to store things, basically a giant appliance space or a kitchen.
so that's a different story.
Right, but if somebody was to buy, but it looks livable. And I haven't been in and things like that, I have a little window unit and stuff like that. However, if I was to sell it, it may look livable to somebody else.
So that's their own due diligence.
Right, but I never intended, I did not want I didn't want my KitchenAid to smell like a Indian Springfield.
No motorcycle exhaust on my kitchen stuff, please. But
It was him that had a problem with it, really wasn't me, but still, but it looks like livable space, but it's not really it doesn't have.
right, so but that's a perfect example because that partition wall is just that, it's a partition wall. You're not actually, it's a standalone structure. You're not actually changing the structure of the property, which means you do not have to actually have a permit for that.
Yeah, and my floor is just still concrete, but it's really pretty
So-
cool stuff.
You don't have to have a permit to add walls. You have to have a permit to take away walls,
And that means
is a
just
rule of thumb.
the wall, but if you put electricity into that wall, now you do.
Now you need now you need an electrical permit. It's the worst.
I need a breaker in my house right now, and I'm not done it. I microwave in the dark because I blow the thing all the time because it's just such a hassle to go down there and do that for some reason.
You know, you can pull an owner's permit for it.
That means I have to get this-
You don't, you can do it online.
Oh, you can do that now?
Yeah, you can do it
I
online.
always just went down. to
No, no, it's most of it's all online. Portsmouth, I think, is the last holdout that makes you go down there,
Back in the horse and carriage days.
right?
I'm
5
just
years
joking.
ago?
Yeah,
I've been-
God.
yeah, I've been the same, yeah.
That was a jab.
No, I'm joking because I've been,
No, I just
I've wanted to fight the people at the daggone city permit office numerous times because they're like, yeah, you got to come back. It's not so-and-so. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? I could cry. Because it's like,
Leave me alone.
And then I found this one person, they were literally the greatest person of all time.
Oh, yeah.
At the city. There's like one out of the 5 people that work there in all city offices that are like amazing at their job. And then
Yes.
the other 4, like,
100%.
yeah.
Okay, so how about decks? Anybody know when you need a permit for a deck?
When it's attached to your house, maybe?
Yay, Cragen.
Bottle one.
Bottle one. We don't actually have wine here. Don't be jealous, guys. No, so if it is not attached to the structure of your house, you do not need a permit for a deck. And if it's not, it has to, I can't remember the exact rule. There is a certain amount of inches per each city. Okay, it goes by the city. If it's certain amount off the ground, you have to get a permit. If it's a certain size, if it's certain square footage, you have to get a permit.
So it's a safety thing,
It's
obviously.
a safety thing, right?
Makes sense.
Okay.
What about if it's a VA loan? I'm joking, stop.
What about if
Um,
it's a VA loan? I don't know. As long as they follow the rules, I'm good.
What about?
If it's a VA, as long as you have a freaking rail,
Yeah.
Right? As long
go
as
up
you
and down the thing.
The posts
And
are
then
aren't
what's
too far
comfy
apart.
for the hand.
it's gotta be a comfy one for the hands. You are correct. 'Cause, you know, VAs.
Yeah. 3 steps, 3 steps.
As long as the baby can't fit his face between it.
Oh,
the
yeah.
posts.
Yeah. My dad did that to me when I was a kid. My mom was like, she can get her head through there.
But then it's really hard because where do you find a baby to test all your, like, when you're doing right?
4 inches,
And
honey.
like my husband's had the like, there's kids are freaking massive noggins, so that's just.
So I was gonna say, some kids have like ginormous
Like, all right, Charlie Brown ain't rocking us, okay?
You're welcome to that rabbit hole.
You're welcome.
What about fences? And who
Fences.
typically does,
That's a good
who
question.
typically,
Ooh,
reports fences?
The
Ooh.
caring neighbor,
It's usually a neighbor that cares.
caring neighbor.
However, are we replacing an existing fence?
No, I don't know, just talk through whatever scenarios.
This thing.
Okay, so if we're replacing an existing fence, we're replacing something that's existing. So perfect example, we had to pull a permit for our fence because I wanted to move it to the front plane of my house. So then my backyard was bigger, right? So I'd have a side yard and a backyard. So I had to pull a permit for the front section of it, but not the rest of it.
Interesting.
Fun times.
so on that, do you have it? And how do I ask this? So
Take
if
your
you're
time.
going from and understand what, let me explain why I'm asking this. So I'm in Pocosin.
Okay.
So flooding and all that. Here, typically you have those, I can't remember what they're called. The fences, they're very like farm style, like they don't hold anything because you need to allow water to go through. But we are replacing ours with a 6-foot fence because we have a pool and I want privacy.
Yeah.
So even though it's a replacement, for that case, I actually had to pull a permit.
Correct, because anywhere that if you are in a flood zone, okay, so this is very specific to flood zones. Okay, so if you are in a known flood zone, and this is also specific to say condo associations, okay? Condo associations have the same rules, where if your fence is going to cause the water to not flow as quickly away from the building, your fence has to be a certain amount of inches off of the ground or have a lattice type structure for those inches. So the way we've gotten away with that before is to do a, like the vinyl fences with the lattice tops, we flip them upside down.
Wow.
So the lattice structure is on the bottom. So it allows the water to go through.
Period. I mean, especially there. I mean, I've always just said, don't put up a professional, put up panels because panels, you don't feel as bad. When
Mm-hmm.
a section gets blown out, you can usually just nail them back up.
Mm-hmm.
That's how, like, right off of Florida, which is in Pocosin, which floods a lot. I work over there all the time.
So, but each city has their own rules. So like, I think it's, there's a particular neighborhood in Norfolk that only requires a gap in the fence to be like basically a 3-inch hole in the fence every 6 feet. So they're all gonna have their own rule.
But in general, if you were just going from one of those wire chain fences to a
Right.
privacy fence and you're
Mhm.
not in a flood zone, you
Yeah.
can do that
Yes.
without a permit. So what if there has not been a structure there then? That scenario.
You have to get a survey and you're going to have to survey the lot lines and then you're going to have to apply for a permit to put up that fence to prove to the city that this is my lot line, this is where I'm putting my fence. And you might not necessarily have to pull a permit as long as it is in compliance with the rest of everything else that's going on around you. They might say, it might just go to zoning for approval and they say, yep, you can go ahead and build that fence. So. You have thoughts?
Yeah, I'm thinking. That's really interesting because, you know, anytime you do HOA, like I live in a condo and they have to be thinking about water, they build lakes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I live in Riverwalk, that's a flood zone,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, so like, we worry about the big one fences for them. So, you know, just interesting how you have to know what you're doing. depending on
Right.
the city to help your client.
Exactly. So like the trick with the turning the lattice part down. So then you plant plants on the inside of your fence that allow water to go through, but you still get that same privacy. Water still goes through. That's what we did.
I love that.
Yeah, I would too.
Ooh, I have a beagle who would appreciate that. Like,
Right? Can I see?
Big dogs, they would love it, right?
What about, I want to finish my attic?
Mm.
What do I have to do to make sure that I can even do that? Are there some attics that you can't do that with?
Well, it depends on the height of the attic.
Oh.
Mhm.
So, well, and it depends on your definition of finished. What are you using it for? Is it just finished storage space? Do what you want. I mean, somebody else is gonna have to deal with it later. I mean, but if you're not making windows in it, you're not making, you know what I mean? Like if you're just making a finished storage space. You know what I mean? But if you want to actually finish out an attic into actual livable space, you're gonna have to have a stairwell that is in compliance, and egress states it has to be 36 inches. So where are you gonna put your staircase? Are you gonna be able to get away with a spiral staircase? Ooh, that would be fun. Because Ocean View gets away with some spiral staircases because they make those crow's nest things. So.
And the
mhm.
VA's cool with it.
And the-
Yeah, it's actually cool with it.
They're cool with it. So it depends on what you're looking at, because like there's certain things that are allowed in certain districts. So like Norfolk in particular, zoning has an entire plan that they have popped out where if you are keeping the characteristic of a neighborhood, you're allowed to do certain things in that neighborhood that you are not allowed to do in others.
What?
Yep. You're welcome.
Sorry.
So like something that won't get approved in like in a regular neighborhood for just like, oh, I want spiral staircases everywhere.
Oh,
It'd be
of
really
course.
narrow spiral staircases, right? So that's just an example. So like, the ones that go up to like a crow's nest or whatever, and it goes into a livable space before it goes to the crow's nest. And they're really narrow little staircases. You're allowed to do those in like the Ocean View section of Norfolk, even though they're not in compliance with egress, because it is that whole beach house feel. The city will sign off on that. But if you want to do it in Ghent, they're going to be like, no, you have to make it this wide.
What about, isn't there a certain head space that you're supposed to have other than the height of the ceiling? But
7'6". Oh, a certain minimum. I think it's, God, how many square feet is it? It's not very big. What is the square footage of a bedroom? Does anyone remember exactly how many square feet?
And it didn't have to be, I think the minimum is like, the minimum, I believe, minimum in Chesapeake up until recently was 8 by 8.
Right, which is not very
But
big.
8 by 8 plus, it doesn't have to have the closet unless, you just have to put an armor in there, so.
Yeah,
It
so,
does have to have a window.
What if I have to cut a tree? That's another elephant, I guess.
Oh, that's a good one.
that's another animal. Whose tree is it?
Mine.
I don't think you have to pull a permit to cut down a
But
tree.
then sometimes trees are actually protected.
Yes, depends on the tree. There,
Yeah.
there's 5 redwood trees in Chesapeake, right there near Greenbrier Mall. They
And you
can't cut down.
Oaks in Norfolk.
Can't cut oak trees in Norfolk. What kind of oak tree?
Yeah, I think there's like certain type.
Is it a pin oak or like, what do we got here?
A lot going on.
You can't cut those live oaks and there's live oaks like in Ocean View with the little.
Yep, that's the
Yep,
one.
Yep, that's the one. I know, I don't know what.
But, you know, but sometimes they just seriously.
I have fake.
I mean, it's mysteriously die. I don't didn't
Yeah,
know.
good one.
You know those blue crystals that you put in your water pipes, you know, when like things are, you know, like you're trying to clean them out. Did you know that if you put those on the roots of a tree that it will die? Oh yeah. I didn't like that tree. anyways. Just kidding, just kidding. No, I do not believe you need a permit to cut down a tree unless it is a protected tree for some reason. However, always, when you're hiring people, get somebody that's licensed and insured. Do not let Joe Schmo climb up in that tree and some Joe Dirt looking guy cuts it down and it falls on your neighbor's house. That's gonna be on you.
Or they fall out of the tree and they
Yeah.
hurt themselves and their license are insured, because guess what?
That's you.
It's your house. It's
Because
your
remember,
property.
it's not the owner of that company that's going up in that tree. It's whatever worker they hired. So if they don't have their workers properly insured with workers' comp, then
And I
That'd
feel
be-
like some of these things, you know, that we're talking about, like the fence situation, if you're hiring licensed and insured people to do that as well, they will also do a lot of those pulling of permits and checking with things and making sure.
always ask to have them fully permit. Because a lot of times they will try to get away with not pulling a permit because it takes a minute to get a permit issued. Okay, so like, you City of Virginia Beach, you need a permit to replace your roof. Okay, yes.
Yeah.
I replaced my roof and they said I did not need it.
Well, did they do a nail over or a tear off?
I don't know, I just.
There you go. So you can do a nail over up to 3 layers of roof without pulling a permit.
Isn't that crazy?
However,
3 layers of roof. That's
3
so much
layers of
weight.
shingles.
So much
However, after that, it is no longer, it's too heavy. Your structure cannot take it. They're not supposed to put any more layers than that on there. However, in the city of Virginia Beach, you need a permit for a tear off. City of Chesapeake doesn't require one.
What about Norfolk?
Norfolk requires one, and it also requires you to certify whether the roof has asbestos in it or not.
Wow. I know where I'm coming from, all my questions. She's got them all ready to rock. That's awesome.
So, you know, again, like it's just comes down to one of those things, and it is by the city. Okay, so like, City of Suffolk doesn't actually issue an occupancy permit. They issue a building final. They consider their building permit an occupancy permit. So if you call up the city asking, hey, do you have an occupancy permit on record for such and such house? They're not going to know what you want. You're going to have sent yourself on a wild goose chase. They consider it the one and the same, whereas Norfolk, you know, Norfolk, Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, Portsmouth, they're all different. I think the wildest one, and I don't always agree with what goes on with permits and inspections, because I think my most fun one was they required us to put insulation in under the crawl space in a flood zone.
Oh, my God.
I have that.
Since you know so much,
Hmm.
how about Smithfield? I have clients who are out of town, she just purchased a house, she'll be closing Friday.
Uh-huh.
And she's one of those people that's really, you know, OCD, every little thing question, so I'm sure she's gonna ask me something. So what about permits, Randy? She wants to add on a roof, you know, I mean, the roof is 23 years old, she may have to change the roof,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so that's one of the questions. I don't
Okay.
know how much that would be in the city of Smithfield, yeah.
I do not know how much it would be. I mean, it depends on the price of the job. So it depends on the price that she is gonna be quoted. So we're gonna take a little Google here and everyone can see me. So. Let's see.
Yeah.
I personally have never had to pull a permit in the city of Smithfield.
Town people are really nice. I call the city office, they're very good.
Oh, yeah. So we got building permits and inspections. Hmm. I don't see a roofing permit, but I think that would be a really, excuse me,
Strange thing, huh?
a really good question to call them and ask them.
I think I remember correctly, Smithfield does require
Does require?
a permit. But mostly, when you start to get out there, mostly it's just so they can keep people. It's like they don't like, they're still a little old fashioned.
Yeah.
Like Smithfield and I were just make things difficult because they just still don't want, they still want to be cows.
Right.
And I don't completely disagree with them, but you know, you're not gonna get them after 4 o'clock and things like that, but I believe they require. I know Ivor, I know that Ivor requires that you.
So there,
Permit.
they do have a minimum permit fee of $85. Okay, they have a reinspection fee of 125, permit extension fee, cause each additional 6-month period. Work without a permit violation fee,
Okay.
$150.
That sounds like it's worth it to me.
I mean, it's better to ask. I mean, if you ask and they tell you no, ask them to send that to you in writing.
Those are great people. I called the city office or something else, and they were just as nice. I'm like, I know I'm calling outside the parameters of the 7 cities now for real. They were really sweet.
Small town.
Yes.
Yeah,
They're also fussier inside on Main Street in Smithfield than they are outside.
Oh, really?
Because Main Street, they have all the little Victorians with the little cottage trim, and they have whole different rules for that inside that area than they do, because that's considered a Main Street USA. But you could go online and like look up Main Street USA, and they have a particular formula for how all that works, but it's real fun.
I just think it's cute. I mean, I couldn't live out there, but I just think it's really sweet. They kept a lot of the same things, you know, from the old town. I like that. Something has remained the same.
It's not, yeah, I don't disagree.
No,
I like it.
I mean, the way they building, I'm from New York, if you building the way you're building, I mean, it might as well go back to concrete cities where everything is being built. Smithfield has so much land. It's pretty. It's really pretty.
No, they're doing
When is
I
a
think
permit
they're doing a
required?
reasonable job of permitting, keeping it from becoming too overbuilt. Because the roads aren't getting wider out there.
No, I busted
You
my.
got
my
like,
side
you know,
door.
like, you know, swamp on one side and chicken fields on the other, you know, you're not gonna, yeah.
If I am right, in-ground pool needs permits, but above
Yes.
ground doesn't, right? That's what I
Above ground, do you?
they don't need permits.
I don't.
I think there's still rules, but there's no.
Okay, so city of,
Have a rule if there's septic though, above the ground.
yeah, well, I mean, you don't want to put it on top of your drain field. I mean, just don't do that. It'll break your septic tank. It'll break your septic. It's bad. Okay, so I went to the city of Isle of Wight. And they, it says, when is a building permit required? And it says constructing, enlarging, altering, repairing, demolishing a building or structure, including decks, porches, and lean-tos, but it does not specifically say roof.
I don't know, what we did one on,
No, you, I mean,
yeah, I mean, but you just never, that's exactly right. Because I think depending on who you get, some days.
it'll be a different answer. It'll be a different answer
And
to
it
the
depends
different
on how much
question.
whether or not like your client ran for mayor, I'm like, that's really.
Who do you know?
And whether or not you like Larry Smith or not, I mean,
Yeah,
cute. But I mean, but the problem working out there though is some of those houses are so difficult, are so old, and even if they're sturdy, that the VA is just really fussy. Because they made us put a floor on top of a 200-year-old floor to make sure that it was really super level. And the minute that we closed, he ripped it off because he had beautiful floors, and we had ugly floors on top of it that we got from lumber liquidators in the back.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't factor in like historical.
They don't care.
They don't care, not out there.
If it doesn't fit their preconceived notion of a floor, then the fact that the other floor was, you couldn't get floors like that now.
And that brings up a really good point. So don't forget that if you have a building that is on the historical registry, that has to go through a multi-step approval process because it has to be approved by zoning permits and the historical district.
That is the one exception though for the VA though, if it's historical, it's already like that, then sometimes they'll be more reasonable, but if you just have an old house on the corner by the church and behind off Main Street, then they don't.
No.
Even if it is super old.
The ones I knew of, they, I guess, registered their house as, sorry. They registered their house as a historical building, I guess. Brought attention to it. I don't know how that works, but
Yeah,
they were a Civil War house. And they couldn't do anything.
I
with
went
it.
in one in Suffolk that they did a really ugly job rehabbing it at some point in the 80s. It was terrible, but that thing was built before the Constitution.
Wow. We try to rehab it.
Oh, no, we were thinking about, one of my investors was thinking about buying it as a flip and he was like, I'm not dealing with whatever construction they built this with. This is just not gonna happen. It was weird though, because we went in there and it was summertime, but like the way they built those older houses with their airflow systems, it was like right at head height was just cool air. It was so weird.
Hmm.
It was very, felt a little haunted. You know? I'm
There
not gonna
are
lie.
buildings that I went into one where it was so, I mean, I'm only 5'5.5", and like I could barely walk underneath the second floor ceiling, like.
Mhm.
Like, literally,
Well, and
like, it was,
again,
like just the inches above my head.
don't forget that things that were okay in the 80s were allowed and are grandfathered in. Okay, just because like you get a home inspection, it's no longer to code now, doesn't mean it has to suddenly be brought to code. That's the way it was built.
The whole pole in front of your gas hot water heater, there's no pole, we're gonna all gonna die. It's required now to have
Yes.
this concrete pole,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
for a long time, everybody wants to.
Nobody wants to put in a pole. Or like, what was the other one? The dryer vent exhaust can't be within 5 feet of the HVAC anymore.
For 1986.
Right, so it no longer can be within that, and that is a newer rule. Oh, and it can also for like when your washer and dryer are towards the center of your house, it can be no more, the dryer vent tube can be no more than 25 feet long from the dryer to the exterior of the home.
Wow. So when we're selling flips, those are kind of things that we have to take into account.
Yeah, you just kind of, just if it looks weird, ask a question.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like what, because that's the problem is like people, investors that do flips, they get a bad name. Because there are some of them out there that will do anything to save $1 and cut a corner. They don't want to pay the $325 for the permit. They want to cut the corner, cover their work up, and you don't know what happened. You don't know what happened inside that wall. You think if they start opening a wall, realize the whole house has no insulation, that they're actually going to insulate it? Because insulation didn't used to be required, but they now know about it, which means if they have a Class A contractor working on it, that Class A contractor's license is on the line, because if you see it, you are required to report it and bring it to code.
Even if it's a very old house?
Well, it depends on what you're trying to do with it. Are we doing rehab? What are
I'm
we?
guessing, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta upgrade things. You know what I mean? Like you can't get away with doing it halfway.
Mhm.
Like if you're changing the structure of a house and you're taking out, let's say we're taking out all the it's plaster and lathe, and we're taking out all the plaster and lathe and re-drywalling. Well, while the walls are open, the city wants you to bring that to code. They want you to insulate that. Which is why these guys try and cut corners, because it gets expensive.
Remember the name. Remember the name, because they repeat what they do. They do in one, they're gonna do it in all of them.
Session of this.
In the unrecorded session of this,
We will see.
who shall we dish on?
Oh, I have some names. Just
I
kidding.
got the name too, girl.
Actually, I'm not kidding. I do.
I don't think any of us are kidding.
Yeah.
We see a certain name on something, we're just like, "Oh, walk the other way.
I think that's also the difference between, because between a buyer and the rest of the world,
Right,
it's just the same thing like everybody bitches about taxes. What is expected and what we're expecting are two different
Right.
things.
right.
And so if you're a smart enough builder and you don't want it, you're just, that's why I mean, this is just my opinion. That's why sometimes when you see a rehab, you go, well, this isn't a rehab. Well, what you want in a rehab is gonna involve stuff that they don't want to. We're
Right.
Not doing that. That's why that's why you see all these little lipstick on a pig houses.
Mm-hmm.
So.
We put paint on it. It looks pretty.
well,
Electrical's from 1930, but hey, I mean, who doesn't
we
love
have
old knob and
granite.
tube?
No, it's white and we have granite and gray floors. We are good.
Yeah.
I'm so tired of seeing white kitchens. I'm so ready for two-tone colors.
Done with the gray.
Done with the
Over
gray.
Hunter green is the in thing they say for fall.
Hunter green, really? I mean, like you
It's gonna be
could,
that hunt, to be like that hunt room look.
I mean, you could go so the wrong way with that. Like, I mean, you can either come out looking fabulous or we're gonna look like John Deere threw up in here.
Look how many blue and brown rooms you had. It looks like a towel from Walmart.
I know, right?
Hunter green bowl poles, beautiful.
I hate you. So anyways, but, all right, so gas, hot water heaters. You need a permit?
I would say yes, because the gas,
Okay. What about a regular hot water heater?
not if it's replacing the existing. hot
Technically, you're correct. But the gas one, you definitely need a permit and you also need somebody that's gas certified, not just a regular plumber to hook it up. Because only they can pull the permit. They have to have that additional certification.
water. What about running a gas line for like a gas grill on the deck or something, like it's not touching the house?
You need a permit.
Still on
You
property.
cannot run gas lines without one. You just don't touch it. Don't do it. Don't let anyone convince you that it's a good idea either. It's a bad juju. If they mess it up, then, I mean, like, you could literally die.
Yeah, one thing is water and another, thing is gas is very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that what happened to that house that blew up in Franklin? Put in the gas line?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep.
That was not long ago, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and you're not expected to know all of these things. Like, we're just talking about these things in general. But like, if you see something that you're like, I know that probably should have been permitted, and this is a flip. I wonder if these permits are on file. I've compiled a list that I'll email everybody who wants it of who you contact with each city to say, hey, where's this permit? Or if you see a garage that has been changed out and you don't know when it was changed out, you don't like, you can see if, hey, was a permit ever pulled for this? Call Land Records. They might know. If it's not updated in the tax, things get missed in the tax record sometimes. It could have been reported and it was missed in the tax record. Real list isn't the end all be all. I know that, Portsmouth takes forever to update their tax record. If somebody does a flip in Portsmouth, they only update their tax record every 6 months. Like, you're not going to have the new owner's name and, unless you call down to the city and ask. They don't update it.
Who told me about pizza?
I have got to say that as somebody who ends up, dealing with a lot of permits, Portsmouth is actually, while their process is not the easiest, they're actually one of the easier cities to work with. They actually really, really care about their neighborhoods. They really care about getting people in there that want to make them better. They're one of the easier ones to work with, at least in my experience that it was. All right, but I think we are out of time. So T, you good? You got any questions? Comments?
No, we're golden.
All right, cool. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much.